And that seems to be a philosophy carried on in the drug court system itself.
I wanted to mention that, Mary, because I find it quite refreshing, having been in the treatment field for so long, that I'd like to honor you, Judge Terry, and the staff that you've put together for Drug Treatment Court, because I have found that with working with your staff and the many conversations that we have, doing assessments and progress reports, that they too look at the client not from the point of view of criminality, but from the point of view of treatment issues and all of those various aspects that go into quality of life for our clients. Okay. And I just needed to make that statement because I think it's important that all of the systems recognize ongoing that there are continual needs, even above and beyond being clean and sober.
See, that may be something that the average viewer out here may not know. If you're not familiar with the treatment system, you may not recognize that part of a drug treatment plan is family issues, health issues, work issues, health, just all sorts of different areas. So it's good that that seems to be something that's talked about back and forth. Yeah.
The drug court treatment team, as I understand it, comes from different modalities and sits down and does a preliminary treatment plan for this client before they even access the treatment center.
Oh, okay.
So they have a treatment plan that they must adhere to and answer to in your courtroom over and above the treatment plan that is done for them on an individual issue basis.
I did not know that. So, so you have a multidisciplinary team?
Oh, absolutely. See, one of the things we realized, and I should say, when I say we, it's Judge Stephen Manley and myself, Judge Manley from the municipal court, because this is a joint project of both the municipal and the Superior Court, and Judge Manley is my counterpart from the municipal court. We recognized that judges historically had been saying, don't take drugs, abstain, don't get arrested, and nothing happens other than to find somebody who again has reoffended or turned a dirty test and is back into the system. So when we designed this project, it was as a team effort, and we worked together as a team. We have representatives from the health department, from the public defender's office, from the district attorney's office, from the mental health department, from the Office of Pretrial Services, the OR program. Both Judge Manley and myself are there. And I may have overlooked somebody. The public defender, of course, is there. And we sit down and we individualize each case. Historically, the criminal justice system, court systems are individual systems. They always look at one case at a time and sentence the person individually one at a time. And so it's a natural in this arena when you're trying to implement treatment to do the same thing. Look at the individual, see what's best for him. So, and I should point out that this is not an alternative program for jail because almost all of our participants spent some time in jail. With the implementation of a treatment plan, however, they spend usually less time in jail than the average drug offender. In fact, statistically, in the first 9 months, those people that opted out and said, I don't want to be in drug court, spent about 4 to 5 months in jail, while those people who did stay in drug court spent about 2 months or 60 days in jail. And that's a very, very positive saving to the public in terms of incarceration. And when you particularly understand that 45% of all of the cases that we get, felony cases in Santa Clara County, are drug cases. And if you can get them out of the jail and to stop using drugs and get them clean and sober, 53% of the people who we have in drug court now have jobs or have their old jobs back. So they're back into the employment market. And the people who participate in drug court, by and large, pay for their own treatment. It is not a program that's fully funded by government, nor do I think it should be. I think that treatment is a responsibility for the individual. When he can bear that responsibility, he should. So in the initial phases, we do a very thorough screening jointly together, sitting around the table in a case management style, and then we go out in the courtroom and we begin to work with the clients and begin to implement that right from their first appearance.
Well, let's take a look at the figures from our first year.
Well, I think I've been mentioning them as we go along. We have about 110, 120 people in the program right now. We have had some interesting results in terms of tests. You mentioned earlier complete abstinence. We expect complete abstinence. We order people, and we talk about that thoroughly so that they understand that. No marijuana, no drugs, no alcohol during the 1-year voluntary participation. Yet we also know that we are going to have relapse, that we are going to have people that are going to slip and they're going to use again. That does not necessarily disqualify them from drug court, although it can, and we don't encourage relapse, but we are willing to work with it. So far in the first year, well, let me give you some comparative statistics. The average probationer who is on a general supervision caseload, or a group of probationers, will test dirty about 28% of the time, or 28% of those people will test dirty at any given time. If you're on an intensive supervision caseload, the figure is more like 15%. If you're on electronic monitoring, it drops down to around 14%. During the first 9 months of our program, the people that stayed in drug court, of which there were about 90, only 7% of them tested dirty. And when they did, we knew about that. We were giving frequent urine tests. We immediately brought them in and we had them sign a relapse contract. And in that contract, we tried to point out the areas that they needed to focus on that perhaps they were neglecting, so that we could bring up their level of commitment and their level of participation in their own recovery to a point where we could eliminate relapse. And so we're dealing with that on a constant basis. It's been really gratifying to see the results. We recently had our first graduation ceremony about 3 weeks ago, which is the first group of about 10 people who have completed this year-long program. 4 of those people had 1-year medallions from their AA or NA groups that they go to, which means they've been clean and sober for a year. It's been very, very impressive. We'll have other graduations probably about every 6 to 8 weeks, where we'll recognize the commencement or the completion of this program, and it truly is a commencement, because these people hopefully have learned that what they've done during this first year they have to keep doing on a day-to-day basis. And as we keep telling them, of course, fortunately, you only have to do it 1 day at a time.
Absolutely. Makes it much more doable, doesn't it? When you have, Stephanie, you've probably experienced both cases, where you have had residents go ahead and complete, I know your program is 6 months.
Yes.
Complete the entire 6 months. I know you've had other residents not be able to do that, to relapse or to use while in treatment. Just in your own clinical experience, and I know this is a difficult question, but what's the difference, do you think? I mean, what helps somebody actually be able to walk through that 6 months that maybe might not be in place for somebody who may not be able to last more than a couple months?
I think, Mary, it doesn't have a lot to do with the source of the intervention. What it has to do with is whether or not the client is able to foresee hope to change. And whether that come from the nudge from the judge or come from their own internal value system or their family value system. Okay. So if they can have hope and they can see their own, through their own motivation, that they can have success.
Okay.
I think that's the most important criteria to success in treatment.
So ideally, somebody who's already motivated can use this drug court structure to sort of support themselves, sort of as a backup.
Absolutely.
Catch net, sort of like, I mean, I know I've certainly treated people who've said, if their employers had them test for up to a year, that even though initially they resented that, they felt, in a way, it was a great aid to them, because over the course of that year, times when they think about drinking, they'd remember they needed to test. And I've certainly had people say that in the long run, that was probably one of the things that kept them clean and sober, was knowing there was that accountability.
Yeah.
Additional support systems.
Yeah.
For sobriety.
Well,
Exactly.
and we found one of the greatest motivators is for the client and the defendant who's appearing in court for the first time, who perhaps is still strung out and feeling the effects of addiction, is in that courtroom for the first time, and we always take the reviews of the people who have been with us for a number of weeks or months first on the calendar, in front of the in-custody defendants in their orange suits, who maybe are still a little hungover or strung out from the use of drugs. And they see these people come in, and we let them talk. We ask them, how is it going? Tell us about what's going on in your life. And they begin to explain how their entire lives have changed. And they look at people in the jury box and they say, I was sitting there too, just like you, and I thought there was no hope. And my life is 100% better today than it ever was before because of this drug court. Now, in 10 or 15 words, that addict trying to convince another addict that he can recover too is much more effective than if I sat there for an hour and tried to do this. And so we begin, judges begin to start using the same language that addicts doing, trying to convince people that there is hope. And it may not be apparent the first week or two when they come before us and they keep coming back. At first it's surveillance, and we're looking at them and we're reminding them we're watching them, and we will test them, and we test them throughout the entire year. But very quickly, instead of surveillance, it becomes positive support. It's a pat on the back, it's the round of applause, and we give rounds of applause in court for their significant milestones of recovery. And people have been even known to hug each other in drug court, and that's okay, you know, because we're there to say you can do it, and you never have to come back here arrested again. If you follow the directions and you do what we ask you for 1 year, you'll have the tools to stay clean and sober for the rest of your life.
Now, what kind of services, if any, are in place for family members, let's say significant others? Do they participate in this program of treatment?
We certainly invite them to come to court, and very oftentimes significant family members come to court. We make referrals to family members, to Al-Anon, to Alateen, to other support groups throughout the community. We make referrals to counseling agencies for families. In the case of women that Stephanie works with, I mean, it's a very challenging, and at the same time it's a very rewarding task, because there are so many issues that have to be dealt with, such as children, and if you have pregnancies that are involved, or expectant mothers that you're working with. I mean, there are a number of health needs that have to be dealt with, and you have to deal with the addiction too. And so sometimes it seems like you're juggling all these balls at the same time, but the results are just amazing. I mean, when you are able to see a woman, you know, make progress in her life, with her family, with her children, with her marriage, and particularly with herself. I mean, it's the rewards are just overwhelming. And the cost savings to the taxpayers in terms of children and personal medical problems and so forth are very, very dramatic. So it's an area that is very rewarding, and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of teamwork.
Well, and we're going to need to close, but I can see from your enthusiasm and from yours that not only does it provide the client hope, but it sounds like it provides the people who provide service some hope too, because it's actually a way to actually help. I want to thank you for being with us tonight. I want you to tune in next week when we take a look at post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm Mary Crocker Cook. Good night.